Back again with the last set of Bari sax mouthpieces that we're going to do some play testing on. This set is kind of interesting in the way that the first couple of mouthpieces I'm going to play today are things you probably are not going to see new anymore. They're not mouthpieces, I think, in a lot of cases that the manufacturers are no longer making. While the last set are things that are popular and are out there and are presently being made, and some of my favorite Bari mouthpieces. So we'll start out with this one. We'll see if you guys like any of these. This mouthpiece, I'm not even sure if Warburton, this is a Warburton mouthpiece, if they actually even made these and sold these regularly in this format. To me, this mouthpiece looks like it was probably, they had some extra hard rubber bar stock left over and they put it into the CNC machine and used the same programming that they would use for their metal mouthpieces. It's very trim line. This ligature that I have on it, I think, is a ligature for a metal tenor mouthpiece. It's super lightweight, probably one of the lightest mouthpieces I've ever seen. And the major issue with it, I don't know if you can see on the video, but the shank of it is very, very thin. And so this mouthpiece is very, very fragile. If you force this onto a neck with a large cork on it, you would probably split the back of this right away. The machining on this is just beautiful. It's some of the best machining I've ever seen, especially in hard rubber mouthpiece. It's just gorgeous, but it's really not very practical. Sound-wise, it's got a lovely sound, beautiful, full, thick sound with a little brightness on the top. Would really be a good mouthpiece design. If you can find one of those in metal, they made many of those in brass, in silver, and I think maybe even gold-plated brass. If you can find one of those in metal, that would be a pretty good find. Very nice playing all-around piece. This is a mouthpiece that I've had for quite a while and didn't include on either of the earlier videos I did. I think this could probably benefit a little from a refacing like some of the other pieces I've had. This is a Jody Jazz. It's one of the earlier Jody Jazz mouthpieces when Jody was actually still using Runyon blanks and just doing some refacing work. This also happens to have the little spoiler inside. There's a little, it's sort of a wedge baffle that's on a little metal clip that holds it in place that gives this a little bit more bite. Again, these are not something that are presently being manufactured. You might see them on a used site like eBay or someplace, and they can be really nice playing mouthpieces, and if you can get them with the little spoiler, they can be very, very flexible as well, because you can take that spoiler out and get a little bit darker playing piece, or you can leave that spoiler in and get a little bit more bite and a little bit more brightness out of that mouthpiece. This piece is a Wolfe Tayne, and this is presently owned, the copyrights to the name are presently owned by Bamber, I believe. This is the kind of mouthpiece that the old-timers would have probably called a pea shooter. The profile is very small, the piece is really narrow, even smaller than the Warburton, which was really tiny to begin with. So it has a relatively small throat and chamber, which gives it a lot of that pop and that brightness. a little bit like some of the Bergs I've been playing. This is kind of really easy to blow. I had to spend some time to find some reeds that would work on this well, but I think you can still get these. Not my favorite type of thing, just because of the way it takes air. It gets very bright very quickly because of that small throat and that small chamber. It doesn't have a lot of baffle in it, but because it's so restricted otherwise, it does have a very bright and very popish kind of sound to it. This, you might recognize the sound. This is actually a Berg, one that I purchased for myself a couple of years ago. This is a 115/2, which is very similar to a few of the Bergs that I played on the previous video. It's got that very characteristic Berg type of sound. You know, it's a relatively full sound with a lot of brightness and a lot of kind of sheen on the top. That makes these very, very popular for Bari players, especially when you're talking about playing in, you know, funk bands and rock bands, and even in big bands if you use a reed that gives you the right, kind of timbre to play in a saxophone section. So I really like this mouthpiece. Having bought this and played this a little bit, it really makes me wonder why I would pay a lot of money for some of the other sort of Berg options that are out there. The standard ones, like that one, actually play very, very well and can be had for, really reasonable prices. So certainly an option if you're looking for a piece that's in that kind of, produces that kind of sound. This is another Bari sax mouthpiece that I've had for quite a while. This one is labeled with the Bamber brand name. Dennis Bamber was the guy who actually started and ran woodwind and brasswind for a while before it was bought out and taken over by Guitar Center and Music 123 and whatever conglomerate owns it now. I think this is probably a hard rubber blank that Dennis was buying from Babbitt and then having someone in-house just touch it up a little bit. It's a lot like the Meyer that I played on the previous video, except that it just plays a little better. I think it's faced a little bit better probably. These are nice mouthpieces and can be really, really good all-around mouthpieces. The ones that are more open like this one I think is a 9, so it's probably like a 120 or 125, something like that. Can be good for big band and a little bit of that rock and funk band stuff. If you get one that's a little bit smaller tip opening, you'd find that that would probably work pretty well for a big band or even concert band if you get one with a tip that's a little bit easier to handle and it's not going to be quite as bright with a little harder reed. So I really like those, but again, something you're not going to see very often. You're more likely to see something like that show up on the used market. But although it sounds a little strange, that they can be a good buy because it's a nice design, and usually they're pretty well finished. That I had to back off a little bit on this one. This is actually the sort of lowly Yamaha 5C Bari mouthpiece. This is a staple for junior high and high school bands and many people who are just starting out. These run price-wise around $45 or $50 generally. And these are really nice mouthpieces. Yamaha does a good job with these. They're plastic, obviously, so you're not talking about an expensive hard rubber material. But for what generally you're going to use something like this for, they play very well, and you can spend a lot more money and quite honestly, do a lot worse than this when it comes to that kind of playing. I don't feel like I can put the air through a mouthpiece like this to get the sort of sound I'm generally going for in the playing situations that I play in. But for those concert bands, or even a woodwind ensemble of some kind, or saxophone quartet or something like that, this is a fine mouthpiece for that sort of thing if you're not too picky about exactly what you want. Obviously, there are a lot more expensive mouthpieces out there that produce a similar sort of sound, things that are made by Van Doren, and Jody Jazz is now making his new line of classical mouthpieces, and there are several others. For my purposes, that plays just as well as most of those much more expensive models. Gives me a very similar sort of cello-ish type of a sound that you like to have in that concert band or classical setting, while being very, very inexpensive. This is one of my favorite mouthpieces. It's a metal mouthpiece made by SR Tech, and it's the SR Tech Pro. They still make this mouthpiece. It's one of the lesser known brands, but one of the first companies that started making mouthpieces using CNC technology, CNC machining. They're beautifully made. The machine work is excellent on these. The gold plating that SR Tech uses on their mouthpieces, all their metal mouthpieces, is nice and thick. It's very, very well done. What surprised me about this mouthpiece when I got it was how dark it really plays. It has this very big, full, dark type of sound that's kind of got this kind of creamy quality to it. It doesn't have the bite of some of the other mouthpieces I've been playing, and certainly the last few I'm going to play here in just a moment. But I just like this. It reminds me a lot of the Auto Link Super Tone Master pieces I played in the previous two videos. That kind of sound. Great choice for big band. Probably a good choice for you guys who double in pit bands and occasionally need to just get a little more sound than some of the mouthpieces with smaller tip openings would give you. I really like this. I just like the way this sounds. It's hard to get the kind of brightness out of it that I often need for playing in the funk or rock bands, but in terms of just the way it sounds when I'm just kind of home here in my studio playing for my own pleasure, I just like the way that mouthpiece sounds. I like the way it responds. This is the newest mouthpiece I've kind of added to my collection here. This is made by 10M Fan, and he makes a lot of mouthpieces. This is one of his newer creations. He's made tenor sax and alto sax mouthpieces for many years, and this is his first foray into making a Bari sax mouthpiece. The design of this is based on the middle ground between a good Berg and a nice playing Auto Link, and I think Mark has done an excellent job of hitting that space. Mouthpiece gives you the beautiful fullness you often get with a link, but it also gives you a little bit of that bite and a little bit of the brightness that you'd expect out of a Berg when you push it a little bit. And so if you're looking for something that's really, really flexible and will work well in a number of different genres, this is something, this 10M Fan Infusion is a mouthpiece you might want to take a look at. It's not an inexpensive mouthpiece, but things are very high quality, as you've heard me talk about before with some of the refaced pieces and whatnot. This you won't need to get refaced. The machining work and the facing work on this is extraordinary. It's just beautiful. Really nice all-around mouthpiece. One of my favorites, and probably the one I'm gonna start playing on this horn most of the time going forward. So you notice I didn't talk about the previous mouthpiece I played there. These are both mouthpieces that are made by Drake, and they are pretty much the same design, I would say. One of them is the vintage resin crossover, contemporary crossover 1, and the other is the contemporary crossover 2. I've been playing this particular one out of the two of them on this horn for many, many years. It's been my favorite mouthpiece on this horn, mostly because it tunes really well. The intonation with this mouthpiece tends to be really good. I don't know if you could hear a difference. I don't know if it'll show up on the recording. I don't hear or feel a difference with these mouthpieces. The designs are slightly different. One of them has a little shorter baffle than the other. I don't think that makes much of a difference in the sound between the two of them, so I figured I would play them back to back and you could hear them. You could hear them both. The rollover model that he makes, I haven't had the opportunity to try one of those. I think that might play a little bit differently than the two contemporary crossover models, which to me play very, very much the same. You know, that have very, very similar characteristics. And I, honestly, if you put them on the horn and didn't tell me which was which, I couldn't tell you the difference from the playing field or the sound that I hear. So that's another 10 mouthpieces. Some of them are things you're not going to find out there new anymore, things you might come across in the used marketplace. And so you might want to give those things a try. And then a couple there at the end that I really like. Those Drakes play very, very nice with a kind of a bright, similar to a Berg type of a sound. That 10M Fan Infusions are a really nice mouthpiece. And the SR Tech also something that you can get that's a little bit underrated, not as well known. And also plays really nice, especially if you prefer a little bit of a darker sound. I get a much darker sound out of that one. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you find it useful. And see you next time.